So we're super excited to sit with you. Thank you
good.
so much for your time.
My pleasure.
We saw the film. If I may start.
Yeah.
We saw the film on Friday, and
Okay.
it is absolutely mind blowing. It's
Thank you.
amazing the way that the story comes at us. The feeling is and the emotion is very present from
Thank you.
beginning to end. There's no doubt about it, and I truly enjoyed it.
You're the first group to see it, so this is very exciting for me to hear this.
Good,
Thank
good,
you.
good.
Really?
Well, actually, I went with a couple of 7-year-olds,
Mhm.
and they had mixed reviews. For one of them, he can't wait to see the film again, and the other one was, "Can I sleep with you tonight?" So yes, they
It's
did
'cause it's-
live
yeah.
the story completely,
Mhm.
and for me as an adult, it was, and as a parent, it was emotional from beginning to end,
Mhm.
and I really enjoyed the experience. So my question to you was, from what you've done with the story, what do you want people to take away from your work, or what messages are you trying to send from Kipling's work or his story?
Well, this is one of those projects where there's a lot of different things to take into consideration as a filmmaker. 100 years ago, Kipling wrote Jungle Book. It's a series of stories. Then 50 years ago, Walt Disney did a very different version that was a G-rated musical. And both of those things are very important. And then on top of it, there's what audiences today, 50 years after that, what audiences today want from a movie like this, and what the technology has to offer, and what the style of filmmaking is for now, and the technology that relates to 3D and CGI. So that's kind of all the ingredients that I have to think about, and it's not really a conscious process. It's something that I've worked on for many years, but I knew that I wanted to include the music and the emotion, and really pay tribute to the legacy of the film and of Walt Disney, who was very concerned with different themes and having the full array, especially in the big 5 films that he did. He was always dealing with moments that were thrilling, moments that were exciting, some moments that are scary, moments that are uplifting, moments that are funny, using music to achieve those goals as well. But ultimately present a myth, a story that's timeless at its core. And so those were concerns I've never really had to contend with. I was always dealing with either with adapting a comic book, or telling a very small personal story where the themes come out on their own. But here you're looking to tell a story that's a little bit more universal, and you want to get the tone just right. And then you want all these effects, and Walt in his time was dealing with very cutting-edge technology, but you want all of that to disappear in the emotion and the story. And so those were my big concerns now, as now I've been in the business directing films for a couple decades, and so it's you want to see what skills you have, and then what new tools you could work with. And so the whole thing feels sometimes like a puzzle, where you're using these new tools to execute this goal. And of course, at its core, always the cast is what really breathes life into the thing.
So I'm wondering. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Because you saw thousands of kids to play Mowgli. I'm wondering what did Neil do during his audition that made you go, "That's him"?
He was on tape, right? So you really you get to really examine the performance. In some ways, it's better than sitting in a room with somebody, because somebody could be very charming in a room, but then on camera you'll see something different. And so what's really important is that whatever personalities could come through the screen is what you want for that character. And I had a pretty clear vision for who this character should be based on growing up with the Disney film. And he always struck me, unlike other characters, especially at the time, he felt like a real kid. And he was a real kid. I don't think he was an actor. I think he was the son of the director. And so but there was some authenticity that came through, and he was a scrappy kid, too. He wasn't a perfect cookie-cutter child. He was a kid who was getting into trouble, that, was a little bit, I remember there was a line in the old movie, I'm a lot tougher than people think. So as a kid who's on the verge of maturity. And so you wanted somebody with a little bit of that quality. And of course somebody who's very watchable, because you got to see this kid's in almost every scene of the film. So you want somebody you enjoy looking at. And so as I watched his tape over and over again, something really clicked with me. I enjoyed it each time more than the last. He wasn't very polished, but I knew I could work with him, because you just had to get honest moments. And so he flew out. I met with him, with his family. That's another very important part of casting when you're dealing with somebody this age. You want to see, because it's going to, you know, promoting the film and being on the set, and it's a you know, it takes a special type of situation for it all to turn out in a way that's good for the film and good for the kid. And so having gone through that whole process, having worked with kids before on Zathura, on Chef, and other projects, I felt that this guy could bring it, and he was just really smart and really engaging with the crew, and very quick study, and we had a really good time, and I'm very proud of how he did. Yeah.
If I could take it back, we love you in Iron Man, all the movies.
Thank you.
As both as a director and as an actor. So taking it back a little bit, if you would be able to voice one of the characters in Jungle Book,
Yeah.
and you could direct your own self, which one would you pick and why?
Well, I'm already a pygmy hog, so I gave myself a little bit of a part. I remember in Elf, I'm a couple voices too, so I'm still a little bit of an actor at heart. But I think the most fun would be Baloo. Though I have to say, when I was auditioning the actors to play Mowgli, oftentimes I would read opposite them. It's not that easy. It's a tough part. I didn't realize how tough of a part it was, and thankfully we got Bill Murray, who just completely, you know, has such a strong personality. It just shines through. Even the realistic bear, you see Bill Murray's personality come out, certainly with the singing. And you know, the Jungle Book from '67 was the first time Walt Disney ever did celebrity casting. Generally, he'd used character actors or established actors, but not ones that you'd really recognize the voice of. But in this one, at the time, the characters that were in it, who played Shere Khan, who played Baloo, many of them were people that were recognizable beyond just that role. And so I felt we should update that, and by having such prominent, recognizable voice talent, I think it followed in that tradition.
Thank you.
I'm curious to know, directing a movie animated such as this is probably a very different experience for you from what you've done in the past.
Sure.
Can you talk about your experience and maybe some challenges you faced?
Well, it was a whole different way of making a movie. The way animated films are done really started with Walt Disney. And it was very unlike a live-action film where you do many takes and many different angles, and then you go to the editing room and you discover the movie in the editing room. Animation, whether it's done with computers or done with cell painting, was always a very expensive medium. And so they always tested out the stories in pencil, and really refined the story before they ever set out to even paint one cell. And if you follow how Pixar and Disney Animation does, it's very similar. They don't start rendering with computers for a long time. They're still pencil artists. And you put the pencil art together in a very raw form called an animatic, and you get to, or story reels or show reels, and you start to get a sense of what the story is. And so I think it was very valuable for me as a filmmaker to go through this process where we really stress tested the story in pre-production for a long time. You usually don't have that luxury. Usually you're rushing to get to the set, to film, to hit your date. But because Disney understands the nuances of animation, we were able to call upon the talent from Disney Animation, from Pixar. They all were, I really felt part of that family. And so by the time we ever got to the set, we knew the story inside and out. And there was room for discovery in post-production, because that's where a director usually shines, is in post, when you're editing, and you could discover new things, and you could always go back and reanimate things before it's finished. But that was to me, that was the biggest challenge, and it's something I really thought was valuable. And it makes for a much more decisive, cleaner, sharper, well-paced story than I'm used to dealing with at this point. So as I watch it, it feels like a lot of care went into polishing this.
Well, the graphic, the imagery of the film is absolutely amazing. I understand that CG animation is used, and of course animation.
A lot of it.
But the way that you really put it all together for us, and having to direct such a young actor on a green screen, and bringing the movements of the plants and the animals and everything else to us, really tells a very powerful story.
Thank
like
you.
I said, full of emotion from beginning to end. So actually, thank you, because I enjoyed it to the max when I saw it. But from other work that you've done, and of course it's a new baby for you,
Yes.
is there anything that you would have liked to have done that you couldn't? Anything
On this film?
Yes, on this film.
You know, I'm still in the minutia of it because I really just finished the technical stuff right before I came here. So this is a very strange, weird. You know, I'm still at the hospital with the baby. You know, so this is still very early days for me. So the things I'm looking at are the things where it's little tiny things like, you know, I wish I could have that sound effect I wish it was a little louder than that sound effect, because you're in the this process is all about minutia. It's about the tiny details. It's about blades of grass. It's about how many frames you trim, which each frame is 1/24 of a second, but you go back and forth on a 2-frame cut. You know, like whether you go 2 frames earlier or later. So I'm still caught up in that. I think once that wears off, I tend to really be comfortable with the film being what it is, and even as I look at my older stuff, I don't want to change it as much as I look at it like somebody else made it, because that was the me 10 years ago that made that one, or 20 years ago, and I'm a different person now. I do know, though, that I would like to play with this technology more, that I really fully understand it now. And I understand what it could do, and what happens, you develop new tools and new techniques to solve story problems, and then those new techniques inspire you to write new stories, and then that process goes on. That's how the film culture works. Sometimes it's a piece of equipment. Oh, wouldn't it be great if I could have a shot that's moving with somebody walking without the camera bouncing around it? So somebody rigs up a Steadicam. Now, once you have a Steadicam, Martin Scorsese says, "Oh my God, I can have a shot that goes all the way through the Copacabana, or I could follow Raging Bull into the..." And so then you get new ideas, and those new ideas inspire new challenges. And so now that I understand this technology, which I think we've only scratched the surface of, and it will become more manageable as more films do it, and digital photography is becoming very wonderful. I mean, it's great that there's a lot of beautiful films being done on film still now, like Star Wars, and Christopher Nolan uses film, and I think that's great. And I think there's also a responsibility to push the technology forward on the other end and see what you could do with the digital stuff, like Revenant. To me, beautiful digital photography using a 65mm digital camera, and how clean and big and beautiful the image is, and how much you could control it in post-production with no lights on the set, and the CG bear and that, how is it different than the CG bear here, and what are all the stories in between? And so as a filmmaker, I get very excited as I start to unravel this thing, because I was very new to this when I started. I'd done Iron Man, but it's very different than this. This is every shot and characters and humor, emotion, and ultimately the real goal is to make all of that technology disappear, so when you watch it, you feel like you're seeing something real, and it makes a more exciting, intense, funny, emotional experience, hopefully.
Well, trust me, you did it.
Thank you.
You could feel it when you're watching the characters interact with each other and with Mowgli. Is this your dream team? Did you had someone in mind, and you said, and at the end, it didn't come through?
No, like actor-wise,
for the movie,
the
yes,
big
for the
one. The
actors.
big one was Bill, because Bill is such a tricky person to get a hold of, and he's very selective about the projects he does, and I'm a huge fan. I grew up. My sense of humor was defined by him on Saturday Night Live and Meatballs, and so just to be and honestly, you know, you don't spend as much time with the people. It's intense, short experiences because you're totally focused on them. But it's not like a film set where you're hanging out with them for 4 months and you become, you know, old pals. Here, every time I meet with Bill Murray, I also feel this way about Ben Kingsley, Chris Walken. You know, those are people that I grew up watching, and so I still feel very starstruck by them. I try to be a good director, but I always feel like I get marbles in my mouth sometimes. And then, of course, you have Scarlett, who I know I've worked with many times. Neil, who I feel like is, put a lot of trust in me to help guide him through this thing. And it's like, I'm a father. I have 3 kids. you feel a lot of responsibility. You want to make sure it's a good experience. You want to make sure they're proud of it. That this is something that if he never acts again, that this is something that he'll look back at as a really great moment in his childhood. That, you know, it's like a big home movie, and that's the fun part too. And the other actors, you know, Idris and Lupita, wonderful moment in their career where everybody's discovering what their potential is, and they're really enjoying taking full advantage of all the opportunities they're getting and the recognition they're getting. And Giancarlo, I know I've worked with before. So it was a bit of the dream team for me. And not to mention Rob Legato, who did the visual effects, who I've been wanting to work with for a long time. He did Hugo, he set up Avatar, he did Titanic. He was part of inventing a lot of this technology, and a lot of the team who worked on Avatar worked with me, great animators. So it was, I didn't know what to expect coming into this, but it turned out to be, I don't ever remember putting this much in, certainly not this much time, and this much problem solving and innovation, and I really felt very open creatively, and it was a long process, but every step of the way it was different. Each phase was different, and it was incredibly fulfilling for me.
You dabbled in this technology through this film, and you mentioned that you want to expand, maybe explore more. Is there an animated film back in the day that you might want to think to like?
Boy, that's interesting. It's like now I want to see this. I gotta, there's still a whole other chapter to be written here, which is me getting to sit in the back of a theater. Like that's the big thrill. That's like I haven't served the food yet. I want to watch people. I want to see how they react. I want to see what clicks with them. I want to see what doesn't click as well. How would I change how I do it? How would I adjust the recipe? So it doesn't feel like I'm done yet. It feels like the big lessons are coming, and then based on that, and then the other thing is like it's what you dream about, what wakes you up, what you think about first thing when you wake up, what you scribble into your notebook. Like that's all. That's not a conscious thing, but it is a predictable phenomenon, and that will guide me to the next step. And maybe it's expanding on this, maybe it's expanding on this world, maybe it's a totally different animated film, maybe it's a film that's not animated at all. Look at what Jim Cameron was able to do. Avatar was a story that was knocking around in his brain since before Titanic, and he just couldn't figure out a way to tell that story until the technology, got close enough, and then he pushed it the rest of the way there. To me, that's exciting. It's innovating and it's pushing it forward so that the next filmmaker can use these tools. Jim Cameron came to the set, and I didn't know, because I was using a lot of this stuff. I was using the camera system that he helped come up with. I was capturing it 3D digitally the way he did. I was working with Simulcam and Motion Builder and all these things that he really innovated or certainly used in a new way. And he was so happy to see somebody else taking what he had helped to build and use it for a different type of story and build on top of it and create interactive rigs and different ways of having humans interact with CG characters in a way that was done only in very limited ways in Avatar. And the complexity of that was not lost on him, and I think that gave him some inspiration for the stuff he's working on now with the other Avatar movies, which is exciting for me. So it becomes this big game of you kind of pass the torch from one to the other, and there's something fun about that as a filmmaker, to change the way people make movies based on the stuff that you're able to do.
What's next for you?
I don't know. We'll see. This is all part of this process is now I go out and talk about the movie, so you kind of turn off the part of your brain that is making the movie, and now you kind of look at it and look in your eyes and see how you feel about it and see how audiences feel about it, and kind of discover things as you take a step back from it. It's like finishing a painting and standing back and looking at the whole thing, and so that's where my head is right now.
Can we hope for an Iron Man 4?
Yeah.
I want to work more with Marvel. I like them. I like what they're doing. I like the filmmakers they're working with. I like the characters. Civil War. I didn't see the latest version of it, but I've really enjoy what the Russos are doing with it, and Kevin Feige, and the new characters, and of course Robert. I don't know that I'm the most objective person because I really,
He's
you
gonna ask
know,
you,
I
you're
really.
obviously Team Iron Man.
I'm Team Iron Man for sure. I'm for sure Team Iron Man. I'm Happy Hogan. I have to be.
Of course.
I'm an employee of Stark Industries.
Well, we hope to see that.
Yes, it's a
I'm looking forward to that.
it's a fun one. It really is, and it's nice to be part of that whole thing, and then the Avengers movies to be executive producer there and involved. So yeah, it should be a fun next couple of years.
You have a lot on your plate.
I do.